Did it do it? Is it recording? Let's see if it's recording. It is recording. Wonderful. Okay, so we're in Isaiah chapter 52, verse 13. This is my son Gideon. All right, Bubba, can you read starting there?
Look, my servant shall achieve success. He shall be exalted, and he shall lift up, and he shall be very high.
Wait, you missed that part right there. He shall be.
He shall be lifted up.
Yeah, and he shall be very high. Well, we already read.
I did read that.
Yeah. We read this together, and you said something about a servant. What was your question again? Like, what stuck out to you about this? What was your question?
Shouldn't the servant be lower than the master instead of he be exalted over the master?
It does sound strange. So, why is the servant being exalted? Why is he being lifted up? That's a very good question. Is there anything else that sticks out to you in this verse?
Who's the master?
Yeah, right. Who's okay? Great. That's a great question. Who's speaking? Whose servant is this? Okay, that's a great question. What else? Tell me about the verse. What's the verse saying?
The verse is saying that Yahweh's people will be exalted.
Okay, so does it say, so you think the servant is Yahweh's people?
Yes.
Okay, so you think the servant represents the entire people?
Well, just one person.
Which is it?
Whoever the master's talking about.
Yeah, that's a
Isaiah?
Okay, that's a great question. I mean, people have read, we actually have a writing of someone reading the passage that's coming up. They're like, is the prophet talking about himself or someone else? Yeah. So some people say that the servant is a person. So like often he's been called the Messiah. So the servant has been associated with an individual who is the Messiah. Also, the servant has been, people have said the servant is Israel, right? So you have a few options for how to interpret this. Mainly you have, is he a individual within Israel, like Messiah, or is he all of Israel together spoken of as an individual? And which is it? Well, yeah. Go ahead. What was your question?
What?
Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. So then, what will he do? What will the servant do?
Using his power?
Maybe, yeah. Well, we could say that. What is this right here? Maybe he's using his own power. Maybe he's using someone else's power. But what does this say?
Shall achieve success.
Yeah. So what will he do?
He will achieve success.
So he'll succeed, right?
Yeah.
At what? We don't know
at everything that he wants to do.
Okay, maybe he'll succeed at everything he wants to do.
Or maybe he has a plan.
Yeah, maybe there's a particular thing he's trying to do and he'll succeed at it. Okay. And then he shall be exalted, lifted up, he shall be very high. What do those things mean? Hine yaskil abdi arum v'nisav v'gavamod. He will be exalted, he'll be lifted up, he will be very high. So, what do you think? What do they say about the servant? What does it say about the servant to say that the servant will be exalted, the servant will be lifted up, the servant will be very high?
He'll be given great power.
Great, that's one way to read it, is he'll be given great power. But what about this business about height, like elevation? First, who's the one speaking? You asked earlier, who's the master? I suspect the master is actually Yahweh, the God of Israel.
Probably.
Yeah, if you actually read something, you've only been exposed to this one verse, but it makes good sense with the context. So let's say it's Yahweh. If Yahweh is speaking, and he's speaking this to the Judeans through the prophet Isaiah, and he uses the phrase exalted, lifted up, very high. Who is exalted? Who is very high? Who is lifted up? From the perspective of the prophet, with Yahweh speaking to them.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, where does Yahweh live? And we saw this in Isaiah 6. He's got all these angels that are around him. Where does Yahweh stay? Where, like, Isaiah sees Yahweh. Where is he at?
In his temple?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Where is the temple located?
In Israel?
Yeah, in Israel. Where in Israel?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it on flat ground or is it on elevated ground?
It's on a temple. The Mount of Olives?
The Mount of Olives is near there. It's actually Mount. It starts with a Z.
Mount Zion?
Yeah, Mount Zion. It's on Mount Zion. It's elevated, right? So if Yahweh says that a servant will be exalted, lifted up very high, it would seem that whatever the servant is going to do will be connected to Zion, I would suspect. Now, I also know that in...
He's trying to try to make Zion believe that Yahweh is real and that they should follow him.
That's possible, but we don't know. We've only looked at verse 13, so let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I can say that in relationship to this verse further on in chapter 57, I think, verse 15, Yahweh will be described this way, as being exalted, lifted up, and very high. And he'll say, I dwell in this very high, very lofty, very exalted, lifted up, but I also dwell with the lowly and the brokenhearted, right? So I dwell in the heavens and a high and lifted up place, but I also dwell with the lowly and the brokenhearted and the contrite. So this language of being exalted, being lifted up, being very high, we already know in Isaiah that it's used about Yahweh. So then you could say we already know that if Yahweh's the speaker and the master in this verse, and I think he is, then that means this servant is probably going to be exalted with Yahweh, right? Yahweh is exalted, lifted up, and very high. So if this servant succeeds, he too will be exalted, lifted up, very high. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Well, would the servant be exalted higher than the master?
Will the servant be exalted higher than the master?
It's Yahweh, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I agree with you. I don't think that he'd be. There's no above. He would not be exalted above. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. So far you tracking with me? That sound good?
Yeah.
You were patient, young man. High five. You're free.
Love you.
Love you.